particular district, and again, which would, again, have an impact on the other school districts. Howard?
Thank you, Steve. One of the things, just to kind of put a foundation on this, a lot of people might look at this table and see a number of people with a number of parochial interests. And one of the things that you may look at is, in some ways, I'm the most parochial of these interests. And one of the things I think that we've done over the last 2.5 years is taken a look, as Mr. O'Leary and others have pointed to, of what's really best overall, where do we go, and that's the whole art of compromise and discussion. The main reason that I'm here, and I'm on this representing the Historic District Commission, is the importance of the bachelor school. And we start with the fact that for a long time in this town's history, it was the only school. For a lot of people that have been in town a long time, it's the only school they ever knew. We combine that with the fact of it being an architecturally significant building, to many people a beautiful building, and it is a cornerstone of the only historic district in town right now, which is that around the town common. And one of the things that we believe is very important as part of this whole overall process is the reuse of the building. As several people have alluded to, it's believed to be one of the major reasons why the school did not go through in the past. It's believed that there's a significant percentage of the community that understands the need of protecting something of this importance, something that you really cannot rebuild and start over with. Along those lines, we believed it very important to keep this in public use. Because the town then can take care of it, the town then can control it, it can really be a town purpose for us going forward rather than something that goes out into the private space. Now, when we look at what we have here, Steve mentioned about portables. The portables were very much a stopgap measure. Anyone who knows the town common area, anyone who knows the site on which the batch resides, knows that the portables, while relatively unobtrusive, and some of us have actually unfortunately gotten used to them, it really doesn't fit. It takes away usable space that the community expects, and it's not really appropriate in so many ways to be there. Having said that, the Historic District Commission looked at the needs of the town, saw the need to have some kind of a stopgap measure, and what we approved was a 4-year initial approval of these modulars, and as has been said, there are 2 modulars of 2 classrooms apiece, with the notion of 2 relatively automatic 1-year extensions. The idea being, and again, as Mr. Jerby talked about earlier, if you look at the original timetable of the original time we wanted to build a new school and address the needs that we have, that would have been enough time to get the new school off the ground, get a lot of things together, and do things in an orderly fashion. Our board understands and recognizes the need at this point that those 6 years, if you take the 4 plus the 1 plus the 1, are probably not going to be enough. And so the need to extend that is something that we understand and respect. The problem we begin to run into if we don't address the situation in the near term is we're in danger of having some of these things become permanent. And that becomes a completely different factor. When the town has a process, and as we've said, the batch is a revised step 2, if you will, of a 3-step process, then doing what we need to do in the short term is exactly the appropriate path to take. If the town does not have a long-term process to address the needs of the schools, then we need to look differently at what we do, and then frankly, we look more at the appropriateness of what we're doing on a long-term basis, and things change. We have to also look at the issue of the batch itself. As has been said by many tonight, if we look at renovating the batch as a school, we get at most 16 classrooms. That means a relatively significant size of an addition to that building. And while I can't tell you that we've taken a vote, because that would be inappropriate at this point, I have discussed this in detail with my commission, and I can tell you that the general sentiment is that this is not something that we would like to see happen in the center of our town. Those of you who've been in town long enough might understand that there's already one relatively intrusive, relatively inappropriate addition on the building done, I believe, around 1949, 1950. Now, that was done at a previous crunch in needs, and at the time it was seen as the right thing to do. But now we need to look at what our options are. And when we look at a town with the population that we've got, when we look at the fact that we've got an alternate site, we need to look at all the options as we put things forward. Now, one of the things you might be wondering is, if you haven't heard all the data of what we've been doing, is what's going to happen to the batch if we have the school committee and the school department leave. Well, we looked at that. And as was mentioned earlier, it's important to know that there's a process and there's a solution. Because there is a lot of mixed sentiment in town, however, over what to do with certain facilities, we have two possible proposals that we're going to be evaluating and that we're going to be funding as a future use for this important structure. First and foremost, when we look at the needs of the school, one important thing that can help is to take the current school administration facilities, move them out of the middle school. That gives us additional room that can be updated for classroom use and for whatever else is needed there. So the major tenet as we foresee things going forward when we move forward with this proposal is to look at bringing that school administration over to batch. From there we verge into two possible options, and we're currently looking for funding to evaluate both. One is to take the town hall facilities currently housed in the Murphy Center, a former school, and move that to the Batchelder to take the rest of the building so that the entire building has a use and a purpose. As you probably are aware, there is major debate within town right now over, one, the benefits of moving town hall. It is a balance between the cost, the dislocation on the one hand, and the fact of moving it back to the center where a lot of people that have been in town for a while believe it should be. That's an issue that we will be evaluating in phase 2 of the F.U.M.P project, but we'll be funding initially the plans to look at the two options of what we can do for that building. But let me get back to the portables for a moment. We've talked about the fact that we've got two buildings with 4 classrooms. We've also talked about the fact that if we don't build a new school with enough classrooms, that we have to then look at portables again. Well, one of the things, of course, comes to mind is, well, if the batch is a place where we most need the portables, maybe that's where we should put them. Well, we then end up in a more serious situation, taking away more land, doing more inappropriate things to our historic district and the area of our town common. If we then look at what the alternatives become, then we look at putting portables on the Hood, on the Little, or in some third facility, if you will, unrelated to the school system as a temporary measure. Any of these solutions involve potential redistricting. Any of these solutions involve the likelihood of overstressing the common facilities at those other schools. Everything that you've heard about tonight about the problems with music, the overcrowding of the gym, issues with the cafeteria and the like, would then start to happen at the other schools as well. And we don't really want to go ahead and undo all the benefits that we've had in the Hood and Little School additions by going to that plan. Now, one of the other things that I'll say in closing is there have been many people speaking, if you will, in the name of history. And there are a lot of groups at the state level, within the town, private groups, that all believe they speak in the name of history. I am here representing the only appointed body within North Reading that has an interest in the best interest of the town as appointed by the Board of Selectmen to ensure that we look at what's happening in this area. From a district perspective, it's the commission that I represent, the Historic District Commission. From general historical issues, it's the Historical Commission, which in many ways we treat as a sister body, and we work together on a lot of issues. I can tell you that the future of the batch, both its structural integrity, because understand that the batch is going to get renovated, whatever its use. It's just that school uses tend to have more stringent requirements. And we're very concerned to make sure that the batch has a use, the batch is taken care of, the batch is kept structurally sound, and that it moves forward for the town to use. Steve?
Thank you, Howard. Appreciate that. Representative Brad Jones just arrived from another meeting of another 1 or 2 or 3 meetings, the last of 4 meetings. And you know, over the last few weeks, there's been a significant amount of discussion in relation to the new formula. Some people here have alluded to what the new formula is and whether or not the bachelor school would be eligible for reimbursement. And I know that you've taken the issue head on and stated what you know and who you've spoken to. And what we're trying to do tonight, again, is just to touch upon those issues that are still out there in the community, the questions they may have. And we appreciate you being here, and any information you'd like to share with us, we'd appreciate, and just restate your position, or it may be.
Well, I think obviously everybody's read the letters to the editor and.
I don't know if you should, I don't know if the mic's gonna pick you up. I should take Tom's seat there.
I think everybody's read the letters to the editor and seen the stories in the transcript. So prior to last town meeting, I took it, I guess somewhat upon myself, I did talk to the superintendent. I called Christine Lynch on the 28th of September, and she was unavailable that day. I finally spoke with her on the 29th, and I think the substance of which was, I asked her that in light of the new regulations and the changing philosophy, and trying to make some improvements, if you will, to the school building assistance program with the back to the school, in her opinion, being considered an approvable project for reimbursement. And her answer was, I think, a fairly unequivocal and informed no, because she's toured the facility. She's met with myself and a couple of people here tonight, as well as other members of the school building committee and school committee. In light of the Board of Selectmen's last meeting, I took it upon myself to call her yet again to reconfirm my confirmation. One of the other things that I talked to her about, as well as a gentleman by the name of Jeff Wilson, not specifically about the back to the school project. I had met with Jeff he's the financial officer, department that involves school buildings and some other programs, been there for a long time. And in the Reading project, they talked about some of the components going to the reimbursement rates and the base rates, and then what are the possibilities for add-ons and the likelihood of this and that. And there's a great deal of flux, but I know some people have talked about, well, if the batch were approvable, you could then get to 69%. And I really, based on my going through those figures with Jeff and the Reading School Building Committee, who was looking at a variety of projects as well, there's not a very great likelihood to get to 69% if the back to school were an approvable project. But since it's not, there's no way, because doing a renovation is 5 points and new construction is a 0. So one of the other things I think to bear in mind is that North Reading is an increasingly affluent community, and the base figures, we start with a 38%, add a couple of factors to that, meaning we're going to have probably a lower base rate. That's going to be redetermined every year. So I think ours is 52.79, 52.89. Okay. That it's reasonable to assume that if North Reading, relatively speaking, increases its affluence relative to the rest of the state, that our base rate would continue to be somewhat lower. And that, it's a little different than having something set in stone that's in law that says, you get 64% and it's going to be that way for 20 years. This is a figure that's going to fluctuate. One of the other aspects I think people talked about is innovative community use. There's not really a lot of guidelines or bases right now for that out there. But somebody said to me, oh, well, we could, we'll have a gymnasium there. Well, I said, that's not really innovative community use to have a gymnasium in an elementary school. It's pretty standard operating procedure. I think obviously the construction manager aspect of it would be something that we would probably do in any event on any project, so we would qualify there. Maintenance, I think in people come in and get 69%, assume we get 8 percentage points for maintenance, which assumes that we have excellent maintenance. And I think with all due respect, I don't know that we would fall into the excellent category, but I don't think we fall into the poor category. But I think giving us 8, I think a reasonable person says go the middle ground and assume 4. We won't know specifically what the maintenance guidelines are, probably hard fast for another year. They're going to use kind of a rough spending percentage right now. So I think that somebody at town meeting used the phrase, a bird in the hand, and I think that that's clearly what we're looking at. So I've talked to Christine Lynch twice, not last February, but fairly contemporaneously, most recently as last Friday afternoon. I also talked to a little bit about the advisory committee, because there's been a lot of talk about this new board. This committee has met once for approximately 2 hours. They have yet to schedule another meeting. Their exact role and function is formative at best. So to I think, to put a lot